It's really cool to get you on, and having Donna on, Donna Sleeve.
Yeah, she's had a great year.
Yeah, you two really definitely two of the biggest people around here, really within fitness and bodybuilding. So it's just been crazy, especially because you all are like really big within the sport and you're local. So it's kind of like that double dip of just being a part of the community on two levels. Because I don't know if you know, I don't actually bodybuild. I'm just really into fitness, and I got into bodybuilding about a year ago with the Kentucky.
Okay, I wondered that.
Yeah.
Like how you got connected in this circuit.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure you've already recognized how much potential that Kentucky alone has.
Yeah.
Across all the divisions.
Right.
And I would assume like a bigger state like Texas has a lot more pros, but I think people are really shocked when I mention how many pros are here just in Kentucky, and a lot of people just don't know because we're still sort of like somewhat disconnected. I blame some of that on COVID. When that happened, it's all the gym shifts, all of our gym closures here have made that a challenge. But then just with like social media, you don't get as much of the like in-person community stuff as much anymore.
100%. And that's why I really wanted to start the podcast for myself on a big level, was to like have just interaction and a community, because I did, who knows, over 150 episodes just over Zoom. So
yeah, that's what I started to notice with you guys, is you were getting such a broad reach. So I was starting to recognize a lot more of the Zoom stuff, which is really awesome that you can do both, because it's kind of the long-term question of like, how far can this go? Yeah. Just locally. Right. But then still, how do you support local at the same time? That's
the biggest question I feel like I've been asking myself, getting into 2023, how can I do more locally? Yeah. And not just podcasts, but also interacting with community, becoming like almost a resource for the community. So,
and that's you've got the right idea, especially in this city, mostly because like just this area, I think of all of Kentucky, has the most bodybuilding attention. I could have said that with more confidence like a few years ago, but like we've lost a lot of really great gyms here, which is unfortunate. But I think we still have the strongest bodybuilding show layout or like community, especially with it being like twice a year here, which helps, with Lexington probably being like the second biggest. But it's kind of hard to keep everything tight knit and grow at the same time. Yeah. That's always joke and say like, Louisville it's small enough, but it's big enough.
Right. It's small enough to where like I'm saying before, like people will reference you on the podcast, but then like I'll go and look at another person's profile, like somebody posts, maybe like a coach will post, I'm getting this person ready for this show, and I'll go look at their profile, and they're pretty small. They don't follow that many people that I follow from around here. So it's like people, it's still so like people are getting into it and growing. And so as much as it is like a tight knit, and actually it's funny because I was meeting up with this person from Facebook Marketplace.
It's terrifying.
And which is like such an unknown. And I was by myself and I was like, oh God, this is a risky thing. But even like we were talking just about like fitness and stuff, and they mentioned like people that have been on the podcast, people that I know from, just being around and through fitness. Cool. And so it's so crazy how like this person that I've never met before, don't know where they're from, boom, now like we have a mutual acquaintance through fitness.
That is interesting. And what I'm starting to notice too is like, I don't assume that the world knows what bodybuilding is, but I also forget that I've been doing this 20 years, and back then nobody knew anything about bodybuilding unless you were in the sport. Now, if you go ask or just kind of hit on the general topic of competition, now it's almost like someone knows someone that competes. Right. Even if they're not at all in the fitness industry, they know a little bit about bodybuilding, which is to me a big step, because even 10 years ago, you couldn't say the word Olympia and people even knew what that meant, or you couldn't say, the bikini division and nobody knew what that meant. And now they're like, oh, I think my friend does bodybuilding or figure, like they kind of can guess, right, even though they may have never been to a show before. Yeah. So that's That's something I think is really neat. It's really impressive. And just like the acceptance of it now.
Right.
Especially for women. Like going to the grocery store now is a completely different story than even like I said, like 10 years ago, just by the way other women react. And that's like a huge thing. And I don't think people who are just entering the sport now, I don't know if they realize that because they weren't existing in it before. But it's just really cool to see the evolution of the sport in general, and then just like even the hybrid athletes now, like you're talking about, like you'll see someone who's in shape or they're obviously training for something, but you don't really know exactly what they're training for. And so we start to kind of like look at people and put them into like, oh, they must be in this category. I'm always super impressed when I see someone training their ass off and they don't have any type of competition, any interest whatsoever. They just train like that to look and feel the way they do. And I'm like, good job, because without something in front of me, I don't know if I would keep that type of momentum up.
Yeah. No, it's very true. Like you have that initial like fire or motivation, and you know, it comes and goes.
Yeah.
And that's like what I hear from a lot of people is like bodybuilding gives me that target.
Yeah. Like at least some sort of event or goal. There's like a kid at the gym now, and he's just jacked. And I say kid, he's like probably 23. And I was like, what are you training for? And he's like, I just like to train. And I thought, good job. Because if you can have that, you're blessed.
No, yeah, it's true. And it's almost crazy that we say that as like human beings, because we're built to move. You know, we have muscle to move our bones, and like we should be moving. It should almost be like and it is to a degree, like a positive feedback loop or whatever you want to call it, to where it makes us feel good. So we do it again.
Right.
But you'd almost think it would be even deeper of a thing where like you would just like crave doing it because it does like extend your life, and you know, for the short term and long term benefits. Like it would almost feel like it'd be even more evolutionary built into us.
I think that comes later. I know it sounds backwards. Like, yeah, you're born with those tools, but I think the initial reward starts to drive it, but then it's like what sustains it. And like, I hate to just say it this way, but it's true. Like a lot of it's, you get rewarded in some sort of a form of attention, even if that's your own attention going, oh, hey, I like this. Or if it's someone else, it's like, hey, good job. I think that's what like starts to propel it forward. But then over time, those things start to become like expectations. But then that's the deeper part that you're talking about. I think that builds as you learn the disciplines of what you're doing over time.
Yeah.
And then you realize the attention doesn't matter. It's the underlying deeper lessons and layers that you've developed, that you've come this far, and now you can't stop.
I've never really thought about it like that, but it is almost like a ever changing, ever evolving motivation. You know, like as you're kind of like you're saying, when you're 12, 13, 14, you start to like think more about your body and like what do I look like? You know, like as a kid, 10 years old, you don't care. Like nobody cares. Then you hit that certain day when you wake up and you just happen to look in the mirror, and it's all about you right there.
Yeah.
And it's like, how can I become better in whatever way that you think better is? Or
even just happy. Like, you know, as kids, I think that's why like it's great that kids have coaches in their lives when they do choose sports at a young age. But in that time, it's just good job. Like you get the praise, the verbal praise. But as adults, it's really hard to look at yourself in the mirror and say, like, am I happy with this on either an external or an internal level, and not just about your looks. It's like, am I happy with the way that am I living the life that I'm supposed to live? And that becomes harder as we get older. And so it's like there is kind of a special window where the praise is nice, but you can kind of like fulfill your own measure of, are you doing what you're supposed to do or what you want to do? And I just feel like the older we get, the harder that is to look at yourself in the mirror and say, like, I did good today.
Yeah. And it's interesting how some people, like, that doesn't click.
And sometimes it never does.
Yeah.
Which is, if that person's like okay with it, you know, like, I'm nobody to tell them how to live. But I wonder that sometimes where I see people and I'm like, are you going to wake up to yourself, or are you okay where you're at being asleep? Like,
I wonder if it's a lack of, like, if it's only a lack of education, or if it's like some people, like whether it's society or your parents or a teacher or like whoever it is in your life that's important to you at that time, like they're not reinforcing that like being healthy is important. So then it never, you never get that. It never turns the light on for you.
Oh, yeah.
I just wonder where that mostly comes from in today's day and age.
That is one of my biggest curiosities when I look outside. I mean, I'm immersed in my sport, but when I take myself out of it, even for like a normal daily run of errands, when I watch other people, I just am very curious about their lives, because I know what a bodybuilder's life is like always, but remove that and all of a sudden I'm like, how does this person live? Or what's the way that they think, or what are they striving for or not? And it's just, it's very interesting.
100%. Yeah. Everybody has like a different kind of, different path, I guess.
Yeah. But I think I love that because that's what makes the world go around. And that's why I don't have a problem if someone doesn't love bodybuilding the way that I do, or they don't want to do what I do. That's perfectly fine as long as they respect it, because I respect anything.
Right.
And I'm not going to tell someone how they should or shouldn't do something. So as long as they don't impose themselves on me, I like that. I like the contrast and the difference. I don't know why I always draw this parallel, but my boyfriend and I, we like to go to raves. And one of the first things that I noticed at my first rave was the comfortability of everyone's body type. And they were expressing it in these really cool and very bold ways. And I was like, how awesome is it that we're all here for music and for the same reasons, but everyone was so comfortable and so safe, and they felt respected enough to basically walk around in practically nothing and just expose and express their bodies and appreciate them. And I was like, how cool is that? And I didn't see one bodybuilder. And I was like, everyone's a different shape. Everyone's a different look. They have different outfits on. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. And I love that. I love when people are just happy with their body.
It's interesting because I've talked to a few bodybuilders who they didn't specifically like say, oh, I like going to raves, but just from their social media. I wonder if it's just like that freedom, if it's just like that, because bodybuilding is almost like this rigid structured
Yes.
thing. If that's like an opportunity to just like be completely free.
It is. And like, it's probably one of the few times where I fully release. Now I'm like super into music and that is my release, but like, it's odd, especially considering like how I got into bodybuilding was from being bullied, which is a form of judgment. And I signed up for a sport that I am judged. But to me, it's like I'm judged in a specific way on a specific turf. But raves are probably one of the very few places that I feel like I'm not judged. And I don't know if it's just the community or what, but that's every single day and almost every hour of my day, I'm judged, but not there. And it is the release that I need because to me, it's a safe zone. And I'm not judging myself either.
Being bullied and like you said, getting into a sport where you are being judged, was it almost like wanting to take control? Like, because whenever someone's like, someone's not bullying you because like they want to make you better, right? It's not like not. They're pointing out your bad qualities, but they'd also point out your good qualities.
It's not constructive bullying.
So when you're bullied, it's like no matter what you do, you can't get it right.
Right. Yeah.
In bodybuilding, you can get it right. Is that kind of maybe subconsciously what it did drew? I'm trying to say this, but I can't. Why you were drawn to it? Was because you knew you kind of knew like, okay, I can suck and I can get judged, or I can be good and I can get judged, but it's in a positive judgment.
I think for me it was just like, taking the control back where I could, because in school I had no control and I felt I just didn't belong and I didn't feel safe, or like things were, I don't know, I always had to watch my back, and on stage, it's like, I felt like I belonged and I felt respected just for getting up there. And that was my safe zone. I was untouchable on a stage. And then when I went to school the next day, I'm seeing who's going to say some stuff that, that could affect me. But I like the way that you said that, because I never thought about it that way. It was like a form of like me getting back into where I could control things. But in honesty, yeah, I would say yes.
And then at the same time, bodybuilding is very much of like you're judging yourself too. You know,
I think that's the danger part of it.
Right.
But you don't know when to turn it off.
Because you don't know when to, like, you sometimes don't know how to be realistic with yourself.
Yeah.
Was that challenging at first whenever you're trying to, like, gain some validation from yourself?
No, not in the beginning. I started to struggle with that when I decided to coach myself. There were 2 times in my life that I coached myself, and that was very hard. It was almost like too much knowledge and not enough ability to look at myself objectively. And I would start to lose sleep and kind of like go crazy over it, which is why I decided to like hire a coach, because it's like, it was just overwhelming because I would get too caught up in it. And now I just hand it off to my coach and we discuss it and we look at it together. But in the beginning, I think it felt like I was excited because I weighed 89 pounds. And if I saw anything that looked like a hint of a muscle, I was like, oh my God, my body's changing. And so I think that started to make me feel empowered as opposed to wondering what I was going to do with it yet. I didn't know what I was going to do with bodybuilding when I started because I was 15 years old. I just knew that I felt more capable of handling a normal teenager life because of it at the time, which felt good.
Was it like I just want to look more physically imposing so I don't have to like worry, or was it like I want to become physically imposing so I can physically impose myself?
Kind of both. Like I was definitely struggling with body image then. Long story short, I was getting picked on for being skinny. And that's what started the other issues, which was, it was mostly coming from girls, and so I stopped hanging out with girls, started hanging out with guys, which was a whole other mess. But in the beginning, I thought I just wanted some meat on my bones because like my clothes didn't fit. I was like so skinny. I was like, the pants that fit me were like high waters, and if I raised my hand in class, my tiny ass shirt would like show my stomach. It was like embarrassing. So I just wanted my clothes to fit at first. But then when those girls started saying stuff, I was like, if they even like blew wind at me, I'd fall over because I had nothing. I couldn't stand up for myself for anything. Like I was just like a scrawny kid, very weak. And so after there was a situation that was physical, but I didn't react because I still didn't feel like strong enough. That was when I really turned the corner and came to my dad and I was like, hey, I need to lift weights or something. So it's just to be able to defend myself. I didn't want to fight anybody. I just didn't want to get beat up. And so that's when I started to take bodybuilding. I can't even say more seriously. I needed bodybuilding then, or I needed something just to be able to protect myself. And that kind of just evolved into, I joke now, my boyfriend and I refer to it as like monster mode, but now it feels good to be that powerful, not just physically, but mentally. Now, looking back at how I felt then, it's like it didn't stop, and now we've created a monster, and that's fun for me because I just felt so opposite that at some point in my life.
It's crazy. You went through that experience, being bullied. I was just recently talking to Sydney Gillian, and she was mentioning,
love her.
She was mentioning almost the reverse. She was like, I started bodybuilding, she was very young when she started, young teenager.
Yeah.
And she was like, I wouldn't let anybody bully me. Like she was like
headstrong, man.
Right. She
takes no bullshit.
She got almost led into the sport in a completely opposite direction as you did, but it still led you both kind of down that same path, which is interesting.
That's what's so cool. Like you see bodybuilders on the surface, and you already can relate, but you really don't know anybody's story.
Right. That
to me is like really awesome. But yeah, Sydney, she's a special kind of a person, and I could not pick a better ambassador for our division. Like she is, even just as a woman, she just really has her stuff together. Yeah. And she gives back. She gives so much to this sport, and I just really admire her for that.
So getting into bodybuilding, you call it getting into bodybuilding, but how much of it was it getting into bodybuilding versus getting into just like building your body, I guess? Like, what was was it the same thing to you, or did the sport really come a little bit later?
The sport came about, I started lifting weights when I was 15. I met a female bodybuilder in that time. And by the time, a few months after I turned 16, I stepped on stage. I'm an artist. And so like, there's certain visual things that bother me when something is off. And once I started to understand the constructs of the sport, now back then it was, you either did women's bodybuilding or figure. There wasn't bikini, there wasn't wellness or women's physique. There may have been fitness, maybe. So we didn't have a whole lot of parameters to fit into. And I could see where I wanted more, like for my own personal, like I would like to complete this picture kind of a thing from my artist brain. But I can't even say that I initially understood or took advantage of this, but eventually I started like asking the judges, what can I do to be better? And started to develop those relationships. And all they would say, they would give me an answer every time, a very clear answer. And I think that's what made it more like more challenging, where I'm like, I have to do this and then see where I fall. And that has just never stopped. Like, I don't think that was in the very beginning. I think in the beginning I was just doing it for fun. And because, like I said, it helped me feel like that was the place where I belonged, and I just felt at home. But then it was kind of tougher. I guess it was around college, because that's when I had to make the decision, like, how serious am I going to be about this? And I used to do the Hooters International Swimsuit Pageant, and I did it like twice until I realized that everywhere that those girls were big, I wasn't, and then everywhere that I was big, like with my arms, they weren't. And I was like, I don't really fit into that mold. So I have to choose. I either am not going to lift weights and just carry that look, or I'm going to pursue bodybuilding and stop with the bikini stuff, the pageants. And I do remember that. I do remember that being a hard decision, because that meant I had to level up.
Right.
But ironically, my professor in college was also one of our judges.
Oh, wow.
And I remember walking into this semester. Now, this is when I thought I was like a serious bodybuilder. I was trying to be serious. It was really hard for me to gain weight. And I remember I would carry around one of those like half gallons of chocolate milk and like put my protein shake in it. And like, that's what I would take to campus for my meals. I would just drink milk all day. And I remember I walked in the very first day on that semester, and he said, "Are you doing the Kentucky Muscle?" And I said, "Yeah." And the way that he looked at me, I was like, oh shit, I need to get serious, because he just kind of raised his eyebrows and like walked off. And I think that's when it clicked that I was like, I think I need to try harder. I need to get more invested in this sport. And that's when I started to kind of I would do that. I would ask the judges, like, what do I need to fix? What do I need to change? And then I would go back in the gym and try to correct it. Some of the things, it has taken a long, long time to even for it to sink in and absorb with me. But I also have other challenges. Like, I have scoliosis, and I was in denial about that up until like probably 2 years ago. And then finally I just accepted it. And so that's something that has affected my look and my bodybuilding for this long. And that's how I'm still applying things to like try to bring a better package each year. It's like, okay, now I'm going to address this. And so it never stops. It's just kind of like a loop.
Right.
But I don't think that I'll be happy until I can look at my package and say it's as complete as my genetics will allow for. And I don't know how long that's going to be.
And yeah, that's a question that I've asked so many times in this podcast, is like, what is the human potential, like for the human race and as a whole, but also just one human? Like, how do you really know? Because you can't go back and be like, oh, I wish I would have started a day sooner because I could have been a day better. Or
yeah,
I wish I didn't, not that you wouldn't want to, but like I could have, instead of taking this day or this week to go to Florida, I could have been trained. Like, you never really know, like, because there's that day before that you could have started, or there's that little piece of information you could have known beforehand. Like, it's so hard to know.
That not knowing, though, is what has made me do some insane things. Like, there's things that I never thought I would be capable of doing, but it's the not knowing that drives me to find out. And that pushes me further in my growth as a human than to assume that it can only be done a certain way. Or like I love, one of my favorite things is when someone says, you can't do that. And then I'm like, well, let's find out. There's only one way to find out. And if you don't push and try, how would you ever be able to even find the boundaries of your potential? And I'm not okay with that in any form of life. But then sometimes it falls short, and that's okay. But if I think about it, it's like I'm still a lot closer than if I hadn't tried at all, or if I would have believed when people said it couldn't. That's not realistic. My biggest part of maturing as a person and as a competitor is giving myself a dose of realism, because I'm an optimist, which I'm glad that it's that way. But sometimes I've had an idea in my head, and I'm like, I'm gonna create it. I'm gonna make it happen. And when people stay out of my mental space, I've made some really insane things happen. But when I start to let people in my space, that seems to be when they get a little bit squashed. So I'm very protective of my mental.
Yeah. I think, who you surround yourself with is very powerful in your life.
Absolutely. And now I have no problem with, I look at them like ripples. Like, I've got my close circle, and then I've got the circle outside of that, and it's rare. It's rare that someone comes inward. And I like those boundaries.
Right. It's interesting, like what you're talking about before, about like being motivated about people saying like you can't do that, and then you do it. And if you've never done that in your life before, you can't really understand like how empowering that is. And
yeah,
I've never been like competitively, like I've never done that competitively per se, where it's like you can't win this, or you never reach this point in the sport. Or I've never done that per se. But I'm a big fan of like doing things that a small percentage of the population does. Like I ran a marathon, jumped out of an airplane, like things like that. And even like how like that's not necessarily me versus someone beating them. It's me like proving to myself how all you have to do is do it. Like the action is really the only thing that matters. And that just having those experiences has led me to be able to do so many different things that that is just like built on top of the other one.
That's what a good bodybuilder knows, is what you just said. It's not competing. You're just meeting yourself, your highest self. And we're all doing it, which is why it's interesting. I'll try to say this nicely. At the pro level, everyone respects everyone. Even if they don't like each other, they still respect each other. But at amateur levels, I've noticed there's a whole lot of bashing and smack talk that isn't earned yet. But it's like every pro that I can think of isn't focusing on another competitor. They're focusing on themselves. And then when we're all in the same room, it's like there's no problems. But then I see some people that it's almost like they think they're at war with someone else. And it's like the only person you're at war is with yourself. But I like when people start to realize that. And that's, again, just maturing as a competitor.
Yeah. And, having those experiences and then like failing, because failing is, I think, the most important thing.
Yes. In
allowing yourself to fail, because you can easily never fail. You can easily not push yourself out of your comfort zone, and it's a kind of comfortable place to be. You think it's comfortable, but you never learn, you never grow.
No, and that's what I used to be hard on myself, because I've failed a lot. Most of my career is failure, and now I own it, and I love that, because now I know what it feels like when one of my clients are struggling. And I would rather have 20 years of failure than 2 years of success without failure, because I'm going to get where I need to go anyway. But now I can help other people, because the percentage of people who are going to fail is a lot higher than the people who are going to succeed in one shot.
Right.
And when I'm talking coaching with my clients, that's something I hit on, because like if they're looking for like an overnight success, I'm not your coach. But if you want to know how to fail over and over again at anything and then still get better, I can teach you some things. But I love that I've failed so much, and that's a part of me, because if I'm looking in by myself in the mirror, I have to remind myself that took guts to get up there and fail and then still come back, because there's plenty of times I've been embarrassed. Plenty. But now I'm like being a little bit more, allowing myself a little more grace when I look back at my old self, because if it wasn't for those things, I wouldn't be here now, and I wouldn't be able to connect with other people in that way.
Right.
Because I wouldn't know what it feels like.
Yeah. I mean, you look at a lot of really successful athletes, and it's not the LeBron James story of like, I've been really good since I was 6 years old, and
props to those people. That's great.
Right. But most people are like the University of Georgia quarterback or the TCU quarterback who, went to junior college for a year, got cut from the team, went to the practice. Now they're in the national championship playing and starting. And, that's why they're there though. It's not in spite of that. That's because like that, without that experience, without like that appreciation of, oh wow, I know I have to like get up again today because this spot isn't for sure today. I mean, I have to earn it again.
Yeah. That's a great way to say that too. It's a daily earn.
Right. So it's kind of talking about that daily earn, in competing and getting into bodybuilding and then realizing, hey, I have to kind of take this up another level. At what point for you did becoming a pro actually like start to become a goal and then start to seem like a reality, like a possible reality, I guess? I
mean, I said when I was 15 or 16, I looked at a muscle and fitness magazine then, or Flex magazine maybe. That was the first time I saw a figure competitor. At the time it was Jenny Lynn. And I didn't know anything about pro or amateur stuff. I just knew that's what I wanted. It said Miss Olympia, and I was like, oh, I want to go there. If that's the top, I want to see if I can do it. But at the time, I didn't realize what all that meant, that it was going to take. What's crazy is the evolution of the sport as I was pursuing it. So it started to like snowball and roller coaster really fast with all these awesome athletes. And so that did mean that I needed to do a lot more work. But also when you look back at 2003 versus now, your champions look a lot different. I think I knew I was always going to have unfinished business until I got a pro card. But I also knew it was going to go past that. And I thought, on the level of like an Olympia, I think that's why I haven't been able to put it down, because I said that to myself as a kid. And if I didn't keep trying, it's like I would just close that dream down. And so I didn't really have a choice. It was either keep going until you get it or choose something else. And I wasn't willing to choose something else because I already invested so much. And I've had some really awesome conversation with our judges that they allowed me to see that I had the tools. If I didn't think I had the tools or the potential, I probably would have set a different goal. But because of them, they helped me see that I had the ability to do it. And that's all I needed. I just needed somebody who was making the judgment to say, yeah, you have what it takes, but you have to do it. And the pro card, all of bodybuilding, it doesn't mean what it seems to mean at first glance. But for me, it goes back to I was the last kid picked a gym class. I got turned down from playing sports. I was never an athlete. I didn't view myself as one. And I also didn't view myself as good enough. So for me, it was more about like, I never went to therapy over bullying stuff, but this is my therapy. And this is me shifting the mindset of not being good enough to being more than good enough. And going from being weak to being powerful, and more so, I mean like mentally powerful. But then it started to, I'm choosing bodybuilding as the platform and the focus, but the stuff that it's taught me and what I'm equipped with mentally, it bleeds into everything else that I do. And so it wasn't about having a pro card title. It was that I set out a goal and I'm going to finish my business. But then the next goal is the Olympia. It's like, I'm not going to stop until I finish my business. I don't know when I'll finish my business, but now it's a question of, okay, I got top 30 in the world and I don't feel like I'm at my maximum potential yet. So now my goal is different. And that's the mental test, that it's like you think you're at the top of the mountain, but there's still a few more feet to go.
Right. This episode is brought to you by Move Your Body Apparel, a Lexington-based, community-ran premium activewear brand that promotes the importance of daily movement. Save 20% off your first order with the link below or use code TWR20 online at mybapparel.com.
If you're tired of searching for a coach or trainer, somebody who knows what they're talking about and has experience, make sure you go check out the new Coach's Corner on weightroompodcast.com. You can find quality, qualified coaches to help you achieve your goals, whether that's in bodybuilding or just general fitness. Stop wasting time and start achieving your goals today. The link to the Coach's Corner is down in the description below.
And even just saying like, hey, I'm top 30 in the world at anything is crazy.
That's crazy.
But whenever you stop and think about it, did you ever not compare yourself, but did you ever think like, hey, this is where I started? And like, I went from, like all the stuff you said of not getting picked and not being able to play sports and to being top 30. Did that like click with you at all? Or did you think that far back?
I was like, the Olympia feels so surreal. It's almost like I hardly believe that it happened. And so I don't know when that's going to hit me, but I have 20 years of things to absorb that now I could say that I have some closure, because over the last couple of years, I've just said, I want to step foot on the Olympia stage, because that's something that nobody can ever take away from me. And there's only a few things that people can't take away from me, which is my college degree and now being an Olympian. Those are titles. But that doesn't encompass everything. It's going to take me a long time to like absorb even that, like reflect on. My boyfriend and I talk about this all the time. We have a hard time celebrating because we're always like, well, how can we be better? What's next? So, my mind has kind of just blocked that out. Even just, that was like what, 6 weeks ago.
Right.
And I actually had a very challenging first Olympia experience that made it even more of a blur. And then it was Christmas, and then it was New Year's, and we've just been traveling a lot and just trying to do fun, normal things. I haven't processed any of it, and I know that my brain's blocking it out. But it'll come to me throughout the year. But I still can't. It still feels like a surreal dream.
Do you think that's almost like a tactic from the competitive side of you to not, like you said, not think about that winning and just continue to focus on what you have to do instead of what like you have achieved?
Yes, I do. I've realized over the last couple of years that that's my survival mode, and one day I'll get tired in life, and I'll choose that day to look back and reflect. But right now, I've got what I need. I'm blessed to have the energy that I do and the capacity that I do. I'm really lucky to have the life that I have right now. And so I'm hesitant to slow down, because that's when you start to realize, oh, hey, I'm tired. And then you start to get comfortable and stagnant. And I look at it like riding waves. Like, you don't know when the waves are going to come, but if you see one coming and you want to ride it, you have to be ready. And that's why I'm not willing to step away or too far away from the things that have gotten me to move forward, because when things are aligned, I want to be able to jump. If something gets out of alignment, I will reassess. But I do think that that's part of my problem is I'm just really blessed to have an aligned life, an aligned mindset, and I'm in it. And stuff changes all the time, and you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow to yourself or to the sport or whatever. And right now I feel lucky. There was just a change to our Olympia system this year. I'm I'm glad that I had the opportunity to get by on points last year, even though at the very last second I didn't need it. If that wasn't the case, I don't know that I would have tried so many times. And that's something that I've had to collect in my thoughts this year is it changes the entire way that I played last year. But I will say that, like, I had an inkling of hope then to at least show up again. And so you just don't know when things are going to shift or change, or sometimes shows get pulled from our schedule and you might not have that opportunity to compete, or, you know, you might have a life circumstance. And so I want to be able to allow for the space that I need when those things happen. But if I'm riding the wave, I'm not going to jump off of it and just say, like, oh, it's time to stop now.
Right. So with that being said, though, do you ever almost fear, like, you have like this plan or an idea of, like, okay, when the time comes, I'm going to like let it sink in. I'm going to whatever kind of you can say about it. Like, you can like, I think you appreciate it, but you can appreciate it then. Like, I'm going to do all these things then. Like, but do you ever think, like, well, kind of like what you just said, like, what if, like the what ifs, what if I don't get to compete again? Like, I want to enjoy it now. Like, do you feel like you're still enjoying it now?
Absolutely. It's now, a year ago, it was last summer, in the 2021 summer, I had a moment of maybe I'm done. And it was because at the time I thought I had brought my best package, but my placement was regressing because the competition leveled up. And I was like, I cannot hang with this. Like, I thought I was doing my best. But every time I think I'm doing my best, a few weeks go by, and then I just have this realization of, I call them like golden nuggets. It's like the universe just drops something in my vision, or gives me something to where I go, oh, that's what I needed to do. And sometimes it's just a conversation with somebody. Sometimes I read something. Sometimes literally it just clicks. And in that specific circumstance, when I thought I was done, I was so, like, not tired. I was just very discouraged. And a judge came back to give me his feedback, and he said something that I needed to hear. That's all I needed to hear. And I tried again, and I went from getting 10th, and then I went to 4th. And then the next weekend, I went from 4th to 2nd. And that's when it started hitting that second place streak. And I was like, okay, now I'm reassured that I'm doing the right things. But it was when it went backwards that I thought, like, oh, I'm not cut out for this. I'm never going to get to the Olympia. And that was only a year and a half ago. But I would hope that someday that I can look back on this and be proud and, like, have it be satisfying. I just don't know. I've never been faced with something like that to where I can, really process it, because, like I said, I've just been in it nonstop. But there have been times where it would have been easy to give up, but I don't know that I have that in me anymore. I think I dissolved the give up now. If I'm not pursuing this, it's for other reasons than a giving up. It's that something else became more important.
Right. That's pretty. It's amazing, because it's really a muscle, that giving up. You want that muscle to atrophy. You want the other muscles to get bigger. The discipline muscle, and you want the, just do it anyway, because you're gonna, like, the reward muscle, like all those things. And a very interesting quote I just heard recently, kind of pertaining to what you said about, like, you were questioning it. You're going in the wrong direction. I can't remember who said it. I think it was Tim Grover. At least that's maybe where I saw it. It was every day starts at midnight. It's always dark at the beginning of the day.
Ooh, yeah.
And it made so much sense, because that whether you're just starting out and, like, it's going to be hard, it's going to be tough, like, or you just hitting that low point in your journey, like, it's, the 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 8 a.m., the sun's going to rise. You just have to, like, be willing to work through those darkness hours.
I really like that. I never heard that one before, but it makes sense, and I like it. it's applicable.
Right. Yeah. And I think that it's just kind of goes back to like what we were talking about before about, athletes who have the challenges and are willing to overcome them. The next time that those come up, they're still hard, but it's not as hard because you can get through it.
That was one of my favorite period of working with clients is year 2. Year 1, they're just getting the bearings, but year 2 is when I start to see those little sparks of they learned from their first experience, or they start to learn their own habits and their own self-sabotage, and then they don't, they start to prevent those things. I get really excited when someone goes into year 2. I've got like some people that are on year 5, and that's like really cool to see because they are just not the same person, and not just physically, like on a very deep level. They're not at all the same, but they start to welcome the struggles and the challenges because they know they can handle it, or that we can handle it together. So that's my favorite. Right when someone's about to break, or maybe they do break, and then they turn right around and go, no, I'm going to keep going. And then they do. And then I'm like, I don't have to do anything. I'm just listening. But I watch them work it out with themselves. And that's when they catch fire. That's when they do some really incredible things.
Yeah.
But that's all the self-realization that it's all their decision. I'm just here to support and guide them and make sure that they stay healthy and don't get hurt. But
yeah,
it's a really fun process to watch.
Right.
With other people.
Yeah. It's kind of like having, it's kind of like molding something, and like heating it up so you can like make it malleable.
Yeah.
That's really where you are at certain points. Like you've done all these good things to get to the point where you can change, but it's like what happens whenever you're finally there? Like do you make that positive change and, shift this form into something that's positive, or do you break and like you're just unrecognizable?
That's like, to me, that's the point. And I say this to people like right when I always do an initial call with somebody to make sure that we're a good fit. Because to me, we're going to be working together anywhere between 6 months and now 5 years. But one of the first things I try to explain to them is like, it's just not about bodybuilding. You think it is. And we set a goal, and we set a date, and we set an event, and we work backwards with that in protocols. But it's not, you're not hiring me to get on a stage. You're hiring me to grow in some form. And it's so funny. I know this sounds bad, but like when even my best friends or my family, when something seemingly in their life just falls apart, it seems like a really bad thing, I get really excited because I know what's on the other side of that. That's happened to me enough times to where I'm like, oh, you lost your job. Congratulations. And they're like, what are you talking about? And it's because at that point, you get to really see what you're made of, and you get to create whatever you want to create. Like if this whole room was empty, you choose the furniture that goes into it. And it's not often as adults that something breaks and we get to recreate it, or even step back and assess and say, do I like this anymore? And so I just love it when there's a fork in the road and someone has to choose, am I going to be the way that I've always been, or am I going to be the way that I know that I could be or that I want to be? And they choose that path. That is the point to me. It's just a succession of choices that you're making on a hourly basis or a daily basis or whatever to lead you into the person that you want to become. And it's great that we have bodybuilding to do that. It could be anything. Because like I said, I do that with like art and business, and like that's to me the entire, that's the real reason we do these things.
Yeah.
Bodybuilding is just it's physically demanding too.
Yeah, it's amazing like what bodybuilding truly like the sport of bodybuilding, right?
Yeah.
But then again,
mental.
it's like it's this like it's a lifestyle. Mm-hmm. Like even if you're not competing, it could still be a lifestyle of like the discipline and of doing what you necessarily don't want to do all the time, and taking care of yourself. And so it's amazing that there's a sport centered around like the choices you make on a daily basis. It's kind of weird if you think about it. Like,
oh, it's so weird. It's so weird because all of your choices that you make for months and years only matter in the 10 minutes that you're on stage with competing, at least. Like, I guess, like bodybuilding. If you look at bodybuilding as a sport in general, that's different from competing. But that's what's so amazing and also frustrating, is that you can make all of the right decisions, and within a matter of minutes or hours, you just miss that window, and then you gotta either try again or that was your window. So that is what's odd about our sport, especially the way that it's assessed. It's unlike any other sport. Like any other sport, you play by the rules and you succeed. But in bodybuilding, you can play by all the rules. You can be perfect, and you might not get the placement that you wanted, and it's just not your day, and you just have to be able to swallow it.
Yeah.
It's very strange, but that's why I promote finding another way of another measurement of success than the trophies or the placements. Yeah. But it's hard. It's hard to take home sometimes.
So whenever, kind of going back a little bit, whenever you became a pro, you know, that, like you said, it was kind of like this thing you were reaching for. It was something that you weren't, you know, you kind of got validated, like, oh, you can do this if you keep on this path. You achieve that. Was there any time for you where it was like almost, because you're looking, like, especially right when I guess you become pro, the Olympia is like you're saying, it's another level. It's like up here. And becoming a pro is like you're taking this massive leap, but you're also leaping almost to the ground level.
Yeah, you start all over. It's, to me, being a new pro is no different than being on a national stage for the first time. It felt like a whole new ball game. Not just with like my own expectations, but then just realizing that at that level, everybody's good. And what separates you now are your weaknesses. And that's a lot harder than it seems. When everybody's perfect and you start to have, the only way to separate them is by deduction, not what that person has. Because that's what you look at. You're like, oh, well, I have this, I have the whole package. And then you're like, oh, wait, I don't have the whole package, or I would have won. Like, that's kind of hard to swallow too sometimes. But at the same time, it's a proud thing to stand amongst so many insanely incredible just packages, like physiques. But I did feel like a kid again. And I'd say I felt like that. I'll tell you, when I turned pro in 2018, and when I came home from my I turned pro in the middle of June, and then 3 weeks later I did my first pro show just because I wanted to see where I fell. And when I came home from that trip, my life was turned upside down when I left. And when I came home, there were a lot of things that I had to deal with, and I didn't get to process turning pro. So to me, I had not reached that yet. And it was only last year, 2021, when I did the Kentucky Muscle here as the first time that I could do it as a pro. It wasn't until I was back home in front of my home city and I could hear my friends cheering me on and my family. That was the first time in my pro career that I had people in the audience that I knew, like, yelling for me, that I could hear. That was the closure for me 3 years later, when I felt like I had turned pro, because I never stopped to celebrate it or acknowledge it. I just kept going. And I'm lucky that I had that moment, because now that show doesn't exist for me anymore. And I can never replicate that. And so I needed that closure with the pro chapter, or the turning pro chapter. And I think that's why if I felt like I didn't have unfinished business, I think I could maybe walk away from this Olympia, because my whole family could be there and my friends were there. And what more can you ask for? You know, you've got the biggest event of your life, and you've got the people that matter at your side. I think I can walk away with that being happy, but I wasn't happy with the situation that happened. And so now it's like, I have to try again to get some sort of closure with the Olympia chapter. But that could be that could be 2023, or it could be 5 years from now. Like, I don't know when that's going to be.
And becoming pro, and like you said, like you're now being judged like on your weaknesses. There's so many people who just, they're on this next level. Even, you know, what you thought was like doing everything, now you got to do more. What was some of those things that you did improve on? Like, was it, it could be all of the above, but was it more like weight training based? Was it more like cardio, like more structure? Was it your diet? Was it recovery? Like, where do you feel like you got a lot better?
That is a very interesting question, because if you looked at my protocols on paper today, back when I hired my coach 6 years ago, it looks almost identical. Workout, I mean, the diets, the way we do cardio, the way that we prep, everything looks the same on paper, but is not the same. And those are just breakthroughs that I've had. And it just comes with experience. I have become more educated. Like, I've pursued education and coaching, but there's not a lot in comparison to other things in life.
Right.
You can't teach this stuff in college. But I do seek out other prep coaches and other athletes. I start to just kind of question why. So I said this phrase probably 10 times today. I learned that it wasn't what I was doing, it was how I was doing it. And that's the difference, because on paper, everything looks exactly the same.
Right.
But how I was performing is different. A huge thing that I know factually now was my energy expenditure and stress management. Because I used to say yes to everything, and now I say mostly no to just about everything. If it doesn't have to do with someone I love or my job or the Olympia, now I have to say the answer is no, it can wait. But before that, this is one of my biggest struggles in life. I'm actually proud that I can say that sentence now, because like even a year ago, I've got my businesses. I'm a bodybuilder, an artist, and a DJ, and I like other things, and I like to be social too. And I was just saying yes to everything because I love everything too much, and there's just not enough of me or hours in the day. So that's the hardest part, is I have to say, well, art can wait, DJing can wait. Yeah, I want to go out to this social event, but I have to make choices. It's kind of tough to say where that changed or what changed exactly, but I started to realize that I was spreading myself too thin. And I was committing to too many things instead of pouring all of my energy into one thing, which ties into stress management and recovery. And so, like, I'm recovering better now because I'm actually sleeping 8 and 9 hours a day instead of being exhausted because I wanted to do too many things. So that's the part where I had to look at myself from a different angle and say, what are other athletes doing that I'm not doing? And most of them were just committed to the sport and their jobs, like the minimum. And I was like overdoing it with everything. And so now, like, last year was the first year that I paused my art and DJ business stuff just so that I could focus on the Olympia. That's also, I've reconstructed how I run my business and like the way that I provide. I'm really blessed to have the clients that I do. I would say like that was part of it too. Before I don't know that I was being a good leader or good at managing my athletes. But now I would say we've all got it down in a great system so that we can all be successful. And so it's taken a lot of trial and error, but I've really refined my life, which ties into the capacity for training. Like, I can train a lot harder now. I can make time to educate myself to become wiser with the knowledge, but I can also sleep at night.
And, that's something that I struggle with a lot, is trying to focus on one thing, really.
Yeah, but if you think about it, like, in not all relationships, but in a lot of relationships, you find someone that you love and you commit to them. But we don't really apply that to the things that we love to do. And when you think about commitment, all that means is you're now taking freedom of other temptation away. It's the removal of temptation. And when you commit, like, you're deeply committed, or you're not. It's like, where are you right now in your life with the things that you love? Because, like, we're taught that in a traditional blueprint sense. That's what most of us were taught. And now you see, that's what amazes me about people who are in these open situations, is they can still commit to their loves, but they still have constructs and boundaries around that to prevent temptations and other things out. That's always interested me too, is like, I'll just say like multi people. And I'm like, that's really amazing, because if you can make that work and that works for you, you must really love that because you're really committed to it in that way. But like, even with business, like, I'm committed to all of my businesses because I'm a professional, and I will hold myself to that till the day I die. So it's like, am I going to be a professional bodybuilder? Am I going to be a professional artist? Am I going to be a professional coach, a posing coach? Everything that I do, I don't take it on unless I'm ready to commit to being professional about it. But some things I've learned now, I don't know that I love those things as much as I have before. So that's where I kind of drop it off. I'm like, okay, well, I love bodybuilding more than anything else right now, but when I love art more than I love bodybuilding, I'll commit to that. But it's very hard.
And I feel like it's hard too to like know if, you know, if it's that temptation of this other thing that it's good, like, this is a good thing for me to do. It's going to be good for my financial. It's going to be good for my mental health. It's going to be good for everything, right? Mm-hmm. It's hard sometimes to know if it's just that thing is pulling you in that short-term direction of like, oh, this seems fun, it seems new, or if it's like, this is truly what I should be doing versus this other thing right now.
That is very hard, because those are there's this old book, like from the 70s, and my dad gave me his copy, and it's like, the binding has completely come undone. It's falling apart. It's called The Road Less Traveled. And I haven't read the whole book, but the chapter that I have read is about instant gratification versus delayed gratification. And the takeaway from that is the things that are tempting and impulsive are instant gratification things. And then the things that you pursue every day that you wake up and reset toward, those are like the delayed gratification things. I think you need both. I think most people need a form and a balance of both instant and delayed gratification. But if your instant gratifications become greater than your delayed, that's kind of your answer. So I prefer to delay gratification. And when I feel out of balance, like I haven't gotten to do anything fun, that's when I'll go do something that's instantly gratifying, even if it's not really helping me toward my goals. But because a majority of how I function is delayed, I know that I'm working toward my actual goal more consistently. So if I were going to put that in terms of food, I diet year round. I don't cheat on my diet in prep, but because I prep so much, then if I do feel like after prep, I'm like, oh, I want a piece of pizza, I'm going to really enjoy that piece of pizza. And then I go back to my diet. So that's just like one thing. But like, even like something that I'm trying to think of what we want to do, because me and my boyfriend are just such workhorses. Okay, like for New Year's, we went to Decadence, which is the biggest rave in the country, on New Year's Eve. We don't do that often. We don't even do that every year. The last time we did that was 2016. But when we did it, it felt irresponsible because I wasn't bodybuilding. I didn't care how much water I drank. We didn't even work out that trip. We didn't go to a single gym. It was awesome. But I could only take a couple of days of like relaxed fun like that. But to me, that was like an instant gratification thing because it was fun with no real discipline, but I wouldn't be happy living that way.
Right. No, I think it's kind of like our society right now is like, how can we just stay, serotonin overloaded? Is it
My boyfriend talks about that.
looking
all
through your
the
phone?
time.
Is it
yes,
DoorDash? Is it
or just even well, I mean, just like social media in general. That's what's weird about bodybuilding now. And I'm saying, like, when I started 20 years ago, that wasn't a thing, but there were people doing this 30, 40, 50 years ago that they didn't even have a camera like set up, like, and now it's weird because you post something and you expect the attention from it. And that's a perfect example of instant versus delayed gratification. You still have to do the work, but what if you just didn't have social media to reassure you that day? You'd probably start to live a little bit differently. Right. Like, my business is very dependent on social media, but I've wondered that too. I'm like, what would happen if I didn't have that like button going off all the time? And that's a kind of scary question for a lot of us, I think, because that's where you would kind of start to have to supply that again for yourself. And as much as I don't want to admit it, I think sometimes that makes you just feel better at the end of the day about what you're doing, whether it's real or not. But at least it's like, what do they call it? Like a placebo effect.
Yeah. You're
like, oh, I'm doing good. People like this. And it's like,
other people like it. It must be right. It must be,
yeah,
worthwhile.
You think that. And then sometimes you're like, I don't care what other people think, whether they like it or not. So like, that's my goal, is to get to the point where I don't care what other people think. But I think we all have those days where we're like, oh, well, at least this was liked. At least I'm accepted.
Yeah. And I think it's so hard because you have to like do the things, kind of going back a little bit, you almost have to like do the things that like suck a little bit more than doing the things that don't suck. And then whenever you attach that to a goal, the things that you're not super hyped about getting up at 4 a.m. to work out, or you're not super hype about not being able to eat whatever you want for dinner. Mm-hmm. Whenever you attach those things to a goal, I think I've experienced a little bit personally, and I'm not even, on the same scale as any bodybuilder as far as like what it means and how it translates to the competition side of things. But, whenever I can't do my typical routine, whatever that is, I almost like feel guilty. I almost like feel bad. It's like I want to do these I want to do these things even though I don't necessarily want to do them. Like, I want to do them because it makes me feel normal. It makes me feel like I'm adding value. It makes me feel better about myself, and not being able to do that. Like you mentioned, going out and not working out for 3 days. For me, that would be like totally, I'd be paranoid. I would be freaking out. I'd be doing push-ups on, in the grass.
Anything to make it feel normal. But when you think about it too, it's like, if you are that way all the time, then you've kind of earned the balance of it. I wouldn't enjoy something like that if I didn't feel like I earned it. I think that's why I don't stop. I think it's funny because the question you asked earlier, I'm like, do I have a mental block where I feel like I've earned enough? Because even when I get a chance to relax or indulge in something, I kind of don't. Like, my boyfriend has tried to get me to do this for years. I'm doing better. But to have a day that I actually schedule nothing, I still can't say that I've done that. It's gotten better to where if I open my phone right now and show you my calendar, it'll look like there's nothing going on Saturday. But my problem is I start to fill that with things. I'm like, oh, I got to get ahead for Sunday. It's like, that's not an off day. So just having the earned piece, I don't think that I feel like I've earned to relax yet. But then when I get knocked down with like a sickness or something where I really can't work out, I handle that better, I think, because I know I've put in the work when I could. But it's funny that you're talking about like the starting your day thing, because that's something that I love to do. That's what I try to get my clients to do. So like, start the day with the things that you don't want to do first. Just like get it done. And then you have the whole rest of the day to enjoy the day because you've already done the hard stuff. Like, it sets your whole day up differently if you're like, I'm going to eat the challenges for breakfast instead of like putting it off to the end of the day. And now you've got this big dark cloud all day. And so it relieves things, but it also teaches you to approach challenge and just handle it, like handle the business so that you can enjoy the parts that you do like.
Yeah.
But I think that's why the first, like when I'm in prep, I wake up at 3. At 3:30, I'm at the gym. I'll usually have both my workouts knocked out by 9 a.m. And I wrap up my work day by 3, and then I just rest as best as I can after that.
Yeah.
But if it was reverse, and I'm lucky to get to do that. I know some people's like jobs are a constraint, but like that would make it a lot more challenging if I had to take any of those pieces and then put it at the end of the day. Because
I mean, I know, like, I typically like to work out in the morning whenever I don't, and I'm, like, thinking about, I'm going to work out when I get home, but then it's like, well, I have to, eat a little bit before I work out, and then am I going to be hungry enough for dinner, like, right after? So it's just like, get it done as soon as you can, and if you can. I just think it takes that stress or that.
That is part of the stress management that I've been able to refine each year is now, like, chasing the hard things first. Whereas when I was younger, oh my gosh, when I was like in my teens, not only would I delay things, I just wouldn't do them because I didn't see the importance or the value in it. So getting older, I'm like, oh, okay, that the hard things are good. For one thing, it lets you know that you are going in the right direction. Because if it was that hard and you just didn't want to do it, you wouldn't. There's something deep down in you that sees the value of the hard things. But if there was no value or reward, you would just stop doing it because that's what humans do. If you're not rewarded in some sense, it's just the time factor. I think going back to the instant or the delayed gratification, it's like you have to go back to your why because you're like, oh, this might not pay off for a year, as opposed to like it's going to pay off in 30 minutes or 10 seconds.
Right.
This podcast is sponsored by Smoking Gun Coffee, a veteran-owned coffee company that strives to give back to those in need. Don't forget to use code TWR10 for a 10% discount at checkout. This episode is brought to you by Move Your Body Apparel, a Lexington-based, community-ran premium activewear brand that promotes the importance of daily movement. Save 20% off your first order with the link below or use code TWR20. Online at mybapparel.com.
And that's tough because, like, you can push yourself every day and, like, it is hard, but it becomes almost harder whenever you do have that, like, long-term goal because you're not seeing that on, like, a daily basis of, January 1st to January 2nd, you don't see it, And it's funny, like, I think about this. I heard from a football coach one time, he said, you'll pass out before you die. And like as like brutal as that sounds, like I actually think about that when I'm doing something hard, even if it's like not like super lung burning at the time, if it's like if it's a hard thing over time, because you can think about, oh, you're going to burn out, but realistically you're going to know that you're burning out most likely before you're going to burn out. So just push yourself to push yourself, to that point.
Absolutely. And I totally agree with that. And I always joke in my head too, that it's like, okay, if I were going to die right now, at least I'm doing something that I love to do, not something that I hate. So it's like, yeah, where's that boundary at? You don't really know, but like what the coach said, like you'll pass out before you die, but you're like, well, I'm going to die. At least I'm doing something I like.
Right. So, this Olympia experience, you've kind of talked about it a little bit, but when you pictured throughout the years of, oh my gosh, I turned pro and now like the goal's the Olympia and you get to the Olympia, it's always that thing of like, it's never as good as it seems in your head. Like to you, was it, or was it built up, or what, like what to you was the real experience versus kind of the dream, I guess?
Everything was the dream until the day before. I couldn't have, like, the getting there part was not what I wished for it to be, but in retrospect, I'm not. It made me grateful. Like when I was chasing the points, that's where it got really, really mentally and emotionally hard. But as soon as I won that show at the end, everything shifted back the way I imagined it being. Because the whole time I thought, why am I so stressed about just getting to the Olympia? And I was stressed because I was getting close. If I hadn't been getting closer, I wouldn't have worried about it. But when you get second place 6 times in a row, how can you walk away from that? And so I had to keep going. And that was tearing me up. I was getting so like, I don't know. That was hard. It's like getting punched in the face 6 times.
Was it worse for you to get second than it would be to
Absolutely.
get last?
Yes. Second place is the worst feeling to me. Because it's encouraging enough and it's proud enough, but it's not enough and it's too close to home. And even if I got third place, I would have been able to accept that a lot differently. But second's just weird, especially when I heard things like, oh, it was just a 1 point difference. And as much as that's encouraging to hear, it stung so bad because I'm like, what could I have done better?
Right. That's what I was going to ask is, do you think about what day was that 1 point not earned?
Yeah. Now with women, well, across all divisions, it can be something as stupid as your suit wasn't glued in the right spot. Your makeup was off. Your hair was off. Your posing was off. Like, it's anything. Literally anything could have been that 1 point difference because it's subjective. But what I learned and what I'm grateful for now was that I can take hits. I'm not a competitor that comes in and punches and knocks everybody out with one shot. I'm the one that can take hits and keep getting back up. And over time, that's a dangerous tool to have. And I'm glad I know that about myself, that I'm not easily, they can't get rid of me.
You're the Rocky of bodybuilding.
I will keep beating down the door. And that was the funniest part, was when I walked up to the table for the Rising Phoenix, the very last show that I did to qualify. The judge, when she looked up at the table and she saw my name, the look on her face was, what are you doing here? And I thought, you're not going to get rid of me until I get through. And I'm going to do everything I can. And that was just a funny thing because then that's when it happened. And then the 6 weeks from that win to the Olympia was still surreal. Like every day I woke up and I'm like, is this really happening? Because I still didn't trust it. I was like, something's going to happen where I don't actually get to get on stage or something like that. And so at least I had 6 weeks to enjoy Olympia prep. So that the process of getting there wasn't what I had thought it was going to be all these years. But I'm just grateful that it worked out for me to get through. But then, so I went out to Vegas like a week early to get my bearing, 2 weeks early to get my bearings, get settled. Everything was perfect. And right before, let's say, so we competed on Friday. The Thursday morning before, when I was like meeting with my coach, I was looking at my body thinking, I have never seen it like this. I've never seen my body that conditioned. And I was just, every time I looked in the mirror, I'm like, who is this? Because I've never gone to that level before. And I was so excited. I was like, I don't care if I get dead last. I was like, I am proud of this right now. Like 2 days out, 1 day out. And long story short, at like 9:30, I laid down to take a nap. And when I got up, I knew something was wrong because I was like feverish. Not your normal, like, oh, I'm warm. I mean, my face felt hot and I was like, something's off. And I stood up, and the next thing I know, it's like my head jolted. Like, you know, when you fall asleep, you nod off and fall asleep. And my head jolted back, and I was like, did I just black out? I didn't know what was going on. So I called my boyfriend and my coach to the room, and we were all discussing everything, and we thought maybe it was like my blood sugar dropping. But like I said, we've never done anything different. Like, we've done the exact same protocol. So it was weird that I was like, we've done this for 6 years. So what's wrong? And then like an hour later, I started like vomiting, and I had gotten like a food poisoning or maybe that stomach virus that was going around. I don't know. But from 9:30 in the morning until like 9:30 at night. I couldn't get even a Powerade down. And normally we're pushing like 400 to 600 grams of carbs in that window of time. And not only was I was so depleted, and now I'm losing food and I couldn't get any fluids in. And it was just this rotation of my boyfriend and my coach just bringing me anything to try to get something in my stomach. But that's when I was like, I've never been scared before that I wasn't going to make it to a stage. But then I was like, what am I going to do? I was hoping, I was like, maybe it's just a one-time thing and then I'll feel better. But then it just kept going. And I was like, I'm going to be, at that point, I was like worried about my health. Because I'm a stage expediter too, and so I know, I knew to let the team know what was going on so that they could kind of like watch me and keep an eye on me in case like I passed out or something. But like I was all that whole time I was like in and out of naps, and I thought, why is this happening to me? I've waited 20 damn years to get here, and I get food poisoning like the day before, and I couldn't believe that. I was like, I'm still mad about it that it happened, but I did have this weird like let go thing where I thought, okay, now I just have to, if I can just get on that stage and be stable, I will be entirely grateful. But I wasn't gonna walk away from that, and so it sucked. I had to go to the meeting to check in, because if you don't go to the meeting, you don't compete. And about every hour I was pushing my tan back because I still had to get my skin prep done and then get the actual tan, and I could hardly like stand. My boyfriend had to like practically like carry me everywhere. I didn't get to go to the Meet the Olympians, which I was really disappointed in, because I was looking forward to like meeting people and having that as part of my first Olympia experience. And I didn't interact with half of the people I wanted to because I didn't want to get them sick if I did have a stomach virus. So the experience itself was just not at all what I thought it was going to be. But right before, I mean, like even the morning of the show, I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. I felt so bad. I was just stressed. I was so stressed because I was like, I don't have any liquid in me. I'm like, and I knew I looked like shit. Like my body did not look good, and I knew that. But I also didn't want to use it. I didn't want to make it an excuse, and I didn't want to make that the focus. So I just kind of like tried to tough through it as best I could. And like right before, like maybe 15 minutes before we went on stage, there was a shift. And I was like, I felt like myself, at least for a minute. And I don't know why that happened, but I'm just like, it just felt like the universe just dropped me like a little care package. I was like, here you go, Autumn, do whatever you need to do. And so I was at least able to turn it on and like fake it. But also wasn't faking it, because at that point I was just so happy to have any ounce of energy and be able to pose. Posing is my thing. And so I was like, what if I don't get to perform? What if I don't hit my poses? What if I pass out or have to get pulled off stage? Like, that would be totally embarrassing. So I was actually like elated that I felt good enough to even go out there in order to perform. And after that, I didn't even care what happened. I think I got like fourth call outs. And at that point, I wasn't judging myself anymore, because I was already like, I showed up.
Right.
And for me to question if I would be able to show up that's a big thing, because like I always know I'm going to show up. But that time I was like, am I though? I was like, I'm not sure. And if it wasn't for my boyfriend, Derek, just like he carried me through physically and mentally. And my coach is incredible. Like I had imagined other coaches in those situations, and I don't know that they would have done the same. I don't know if the alignment of thinking would have been the same, but me and my coach are very much on par. And so we made the decisions together, but that's something that we've never faced before. And now I know some things that if one of my clients go through that, I guess. So I'm trying to like see the good in it, but it just felt like a whiff. Like I do feel incomplete with that Olympia experience, but all I can say to myself is like, well, the next Olympia can only be better, right? Like that was a practice Olympia.
Yeah.
Now let's see what happens if I actually show up 100%.
Definitely a unique experience to say the least, like
Unique is a good word.
Yeah. And I think too, I've heard people say it. It's like, getting second in all those shows. It was something. Whether you're religious, whether you're spiritual, whatever it is. It's like, is this person the person for this? Like, it's a test. Like, it's testing. Is she going to continue doing it? We're going to put another obstacle. Here's another second place. You know how much she hates second place. I mean, then getting to the Olympia, it's like, okay, she got there. She, she's quote unquote worthy of this, or like she's the person we thought she was to get here. But now let's put another obstacle. Let's see if she's going to respond the way that she should. And like, I feel like that's a kind of a good way to look at it. At least, it's a positive way. It's like, okay, I've got through this situation, this trial, and like you're saying, it's a lesson for yourself. It's a lesson for future clients that may go through something like that.
Yeah, I can't say if I were going to sum up this past year, it definitely showed me what I was made of, and I'm glad that I have that in my head, because it's like each year, it's like, okay, what else are you going to throw at me? Because I can handle it, and I believe in that. I believe that when you're headed towards something you want, if there aren't obstacles, then something's wrong. It's either not actually what you want, or it's not the path you're supposed to go down. So I welcome those things now. Before, I would say like, oh, there's too much. Oh my gosh, there's a book that's like my Bible. It's called The War of Art, not The Art of War.
Yeah.
And it talks about, it's one of the best reads. And it talks about resistance. And it's either internal resistance, like you versus yourself, or external resistance, which is things outside of us. And the external resistance would be enough to make some people shy away. But other people, it's like when you recognize what it actually is, it's actually just guiding you closer to where you're supposed to be, if that's what you're really trying to pursue. So now, before I even enter, that's why I'm so consistent, because I know things are going to go wrong. But when they do go wrong, I'm more prepared because I stayed prepared by being consistent, So now when things go wrong, I'm like, all right, I'm on the right path. Let's get through this. And for me, they happen in like threes. So like the first thing will go down, I work through it, and I'm like, all right, what's next? There's going to be something. If it's once in a while, there will be a time where there's no resistance. And I'm suspicious of it. I'm like, something didn't go wrong this time. What's wrong? But those are like beacons that tell you that you're headed in the right direction. But if you really want this, you have to prove that you really want it and work through it. Yeah. And that's anything.
Yeah. It's a little turn in the road, I mean, your path isn't going to be straight to it.
And you have at any point, you have the choice to say, this is too hard. I'm not going to do it. And then you don't get to have what you wanted.
Right.
And so that's what I like, is I like when the universe puts things in my way, because then I'm like, this is a test. If I pass the test, I'll be rewarded. And I always am. Even if it's not in a way that I could have anticipated, or the reward that I thought that I was going to get. And sometimes it takes a few months to sink in. And then I look back and I'm like, oh, how lucky am I that I got that lesson? And it might, to other people, they can't see that. And I think I always wonder what people think when they see my competitive career, because it's not one that many people would choose. And I understand why, but they can't know what I've gained going through all of this. And it's like, I've gained some things that are invaluable and that I never could have imagined. And it's all through bodybuilding. But I know people are like, why does she keep getting up there? Like, why does she keep, like, why is it taking so long or whatever? But at the end of the day, I'm okay with it.
Yeah. I mean, and like you said, it's your path. Nobody knows what you've built,
Right.
what you've, mentally and emotionally, like all those things, starting at getting into the gym at 14, like if you can like have like a video game thing and you see all these different things like rising, all these, mental strength gain, like all these different, like two different characters almost. Like somebody else that wouldn't be beneficial. Like it wouldn't, like they might have great mental strength to start out. They need these other lessons. They need these other things to go through to earn kind of their upgrade character, I guess.
Yeah, I like that analogy because it makes a lot of sense.
So moving into this year, into 2023, and you know, like you said, it's a new Olympia system without the point system, and you know, going off of wins, and just really just every year, and I guess every day, our bodies are changing, and that we need new different things. But like as you continue in your career and into 2023, how do you plan on taking on this year? I mean, is it still kind of the same blueprint? Is it still, or is it just like, let's figure something out?
This is completely different now because, in essence, if my package isn't good enough to win, then I what's the point in trying, kind of thing. Which is not something I normally say, but I had a little battle with myself when I first saw that, because my initial gut knee-jerk reaction was to say, "Oh, that's too hard. I need more time." But when you think about what more time means, I'm like, dude, is that really the right choice for me? Because each year, discussing with judges, it's like I get closer, but I haven't taken a year off since 2013. And a year off for me could be a slippery slope. So instead of saying, oh, I'm going to take the year off, right now I'm in a position to say, I'm going to push as hard as I can in a very short amount of time. And there will come a point where I need to make a decision if I'm going to step on stage or not. But if I don't keep that window, if I don't keep that concise parameter around my goal, I don't want to find out what would happen if I didn't put that pressure on myself. I'm afraid I would relax. And like we talked about earlier, when you slow down, you start to lose your momentum. And right now I have momentum. And for me, on a personal level this year, like, I know what my weaknesses are, and I know that if I don't fix them, it's going to be a repeat. So no matter what, I need to fix things. I need to complete my package. And until I do that work and make it happen, I really can't make a next assessment. But from my personal reasons for doing this is I don't want it to be easier. Like, as soon as I saw that come out, I was like, this is too hard. I was like, no, that's not the right way to think about it. You just need to level up. And what that means is, I've done pretty good about this the last few years, but that just means off season is not an off season anymore. I'm still in prep. It's just, I get a little more food right now. And I'm not traveling every week to go do a show. So now it just means off season needs to be more stringent and strict until I can come to that conclusion. But like, if I do step on stage this year and I don't win a show, I'm not going to be mad at myself, because it won't be because I didn't try. And I'm allowing myself a little bit more grace because of the system change and because of the time frame. We don't get a full calendar year now. The Olympia was in December and now it's in September. I'm sorry, it's in November. The cutoff is, I think, the first week of October. So we're under 9 months now. Wow. And for us to just find that out a few weeks ago, I'm going to be really impressed with the people that make huge changes. And they'll do it. But when I want to be one of those people too. And if I don't push myself mentally to even act like it's possible, then I'm shortchanging myself. So right now I'm shifting my mindset more to, okay, let's just see what I can do in 6 months or whatever, and then assess if it's time to push or not. But if I allowed myself a year, I don't know that I would be I don't know if I would be as hard on myself as I should be. I would be a little bit too lax. And then it's harder to get back in it when you're out of it. And I'd rather just stay in it. I'd rather stay in it and make slower progress than to step away and lose my bearings and try to get that momentum back. And I mean that in like a short term, like couple of months versus like a year or two. So yeah, it's just going to come down to me testing and pushing the boundaries to find out what's possible of what I can improve in the next couple months. But I'm still leaving it on the table. Like if I haven't brought up my weak points, I'm just gonna have to do some deeper thinking here. So I kind of don't know what I'm going to do. I just know that I need to level up and just take last year's autumn and just go ahead and like you were talking about, like the disciplines, the hard things. I have a list in my phone that I've been putting in over this last few weeks of the hard things that I don't want to do. I'm seeking those out now so that I can get there faster. Because usually in prep, it's like things are hard. And then you're like, well, what else can I do? What else can I do? So I'm keeping a running list of the what else's so that I can implement them sooner. And this sounds bad, but it's not. It makes perfect sense. It's a matter of how can I suffer and how can I be more miserable sooner? Because that's where you need to be. The amount of your success just comes down to how much you are willing to suffer for it. And I'm ready to suffer a little bit more, I guess, if that means I can be more successful.
And does that put, the most previous year's Olympian athletes, I don't want to say at a disadvantage, but on a different playing field versus those athletes who maybe have a little bit longer time now because it is a reduced time to get ready?
Maybe, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there's a way to know that because like some of our top Olympians have very little to fix because even though they change each year, they still meet the perfect standard. And they really shouldn't change if they're smart, which most of them are. So as long as you're still within the parameters of what division you're representing, you take your judge's feedback, but that feedback could be something as subtle as you had a film of water over your glutes. Next time, don't do that. But then take someone like me, for example, and it's like, hey, you need to add mass and thickness and width to your back. Those are two very different games. And so like I can see where some Olympians could have need a little bit more development, but for some of them it's just a matter of their conditioning versus fullness, their water versus dryness, and so it's I don't know, that's a very easy thing to compare, because it's like if you look at like I'm going to use Sydney for example. Sydney is always the perfect standard for figure, even though she has improved her package every single year. She just kind of knows where those boundaries are. And with her genetics, and she never crosses the line. And to me, that's an art. But then you see other Olympians who, a couple years ago, they were top 15, and then they're top 10, and now they're top 5. I don't know how long it took them, but it's like each of us are playing our own different game to try to all meet at that standard top. And so, like, some people who might have an entire year to get, or we'll even say more than a year. Let's say somebody didn't compete at all last year and they're just now getting into the Olympia run for 2023. That may have benefited them. But what if that was a stressful year? What if they really didn't put on that much mass? What if they put on too much body fat? What if their hormones got off? It's like there's a lot of things that can go wrong with a lot of time. But then you take someone else who just stepped off stage and maybe they're going to chase it again this year. If everything is aligned and they're healthy, they can make really fast progress. Maybe it doesn't take them that long to balance their hormones, or maybe they're actually recovered, or, whatever. So that's what's interesting is like, there's no Olympia playbook. Lots of other sports have playbooks, but my boyfriend and I talk about this all the time. There's so many different ways to get there, and no one has the perfect plan that they could
share,
teach someone else.
Right.
You just have yours, and your capabilities, and hopefully a great coach and a lot of support.
Oh yeah, that's it. I mean, it's just about, I guess, finding it, finding that playbook for yourself.
That's just it. It's like we're all trying to figure out the way when really it's like there's a lot of ways. And I even in my coaching approach, I say that there's no right or wrong way. It's just here's a cluster of ways that work and here's some that are inefficient. But for some people, a short year is efficient, and for some people it's not. And for some people, a long year is efficient, and some people it's not. So that's why I always like hearing what other competitors are doing, because it just kind of opens my perspective. But I also get to try that on with myself and say, that doesn't quite fit me. Or like, yeah, I like that idea. I'm going to apply that to myself. So that's when I had to make the decision of, am I going to take a year off or not? That was kind of me trying on outfits of like, okay, what would a year off look like for me? And I think my boyfriend and I both knew deep down that it wasn't a good fit. Because a year off is just, I don't know that that's for me. When I say year off, I mean like from prep, not necessarily from stage. But I know myself, and I always do my best work under pressure. If there's a deadline, that's when I get the most powerful, the most creative. Nothing can stop me if there's pressure. If I take the pressure off, I don't know that I'd like me. I don't think that would feel very good.
It's I guess it's like what you become accustomed to, and because you have been in this world of almost like a world of like, it's a world of stress, but it's also a world of like managing that stress. Being in that since you've competed, it's like it's like if you looked at somebody else who hasn't, it's just their world, and taking them out of their world, putting them into your world wouldn't work either.
Exactly.
So going back to a world that you don't even really like, you haven't been in for so long, it's almost like it wouldn't work. I feel like, it would eventually, but it just takes, it's almost hard to, like you said, get accustomed to this, then come back to this and be reaccustomed to it.
And I'm very structure based. Like my schedule every single week looks like 95% the same. And I like that, whether I'm in prep or not. I used to have seasons where I would have structure, and then I would off season not have structure. It took me a long time to learn that did not work for me at all. So now it's like I still meal prep the same time. I still do my cardio first thing in the morning. I still go to the gym at the same times a day, because that's what I've learned what works for me. And I love my coach. Like, I know that when we have to make the decision, we will make the right decision. If I'm not ready, he'll tell me. But that doesn't mean we stop working. All that means is we just extend what we're doing now longer. But I trust him to use his eyes and say, we still have work to do, or yes, we've brought that up to par. And I do value my relationships with judges, that I can ask them. I can say, hey, where are my weaknesses here? And I don't think a lot of competitors realize that they can have those discussions with judges. It's the most valuable tool, and that's what's gotten me where I am now, but it's what got me there the fastest. Was they want to help competitors get it right. It's just up to us to do the work. They can't just hand it to us. But I've got 3 selective judges who I will ask as I'm doing my off season and say, I don't even say anymore. I don't even say, what do I need to do? I just say, what do you see? And sometimes the answer has been, this is the best you ever looked. Sometimes they'll say, you need to bring up this point. You need to push the conditioning. That's the question I ask them now. I say, what do you see, so that I can see it through their perspective? Then me and my coach use that to come up with our adjustments.
Right.
But I do that a little more frequently now to make sure that we've got the right goggles on.
Yeah.
Because even in off season, you're like, oh my God, I put on so much muscle, I'm perfect now. And then you diet down, and then you're like, oh, that was actually fat, not muscle, and now I don't have the shape or something. It's like the detail just doesn't look the same.
Yeah. That's the challenge with a body. It's like it takes so long to to create within the body.
Yes.
It's and it depends like your specifics too within your own, within your body. Like some people build faster, some people, takes them longer to build. Some people lose weight easier. Like that's different, but just in general, like you have to like devote so much time to doing it. And then when you do realize it's either good or bad, it can be like, oh my gosh, that was great. I'm glad I spent all this time on this. Or it's like, oh wow, we just kind of wasted a little bit of this time.
Yes. And that's, I will say that my coach and I've got a lot better at that from year to year, but that's definitely, I'm very familiar with that experience that you're talking about.
So then it's like, oh my gosh, I suffered and was disciplined and I didn't get the result. Like I did everything I thought. Like it's another challenging part with the body is like it's a mover, it's a shaker. Like it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't play out the way that maybe even it did the last time you did the same thing.
Exactly. And that's like, I realize now, and I'm okay with it, that I'm like, I'm just a late bloomer. Like, I'm still not peaked yet in my physique's abilities, and I'm 35. And I've been doing this for 20 years. So one of the hardest things to hear as feedback was, you just need more time. And I'm like, it's been 20 years, man. Like, that's a lot of time. But going back to the factors that go into the changes, I can't say that I've mastered everything for 20 years. Like, even though I did it, I wasn't a master of it. And I don't know that even right now I can say I'm a master of anything except posing. Because there's always just something that you can try differently. Like, right, what you think you've got it figured out, and then there's just one more thing. There's one more thing you can try. And that's just what keeps edging it along. But to me, that's like the fun part, is you just drop one new variable in. Right. It could go very wrong. It could go very right. It's exciting when it goes right, but when it goes wrong, you're like, oh, I shouldn't do that again.
Yeah. And that's
the only way to know. The only way to know is to get on stage.
Right.
Like, even if you peaked your body perfectly and you didn't have that stage picture to compare, the pictures don't even do it justice. Because who knows when the photographer snapped that picture. That's why I try to tell my clients, it's like, you can only have stage experience by getting on stage. You could, even if you got like the tan and stuff, it still isn't the same lighting. It's still not, you're still not in the same mental space that you are when you're on stage. So it's like, that's really the only way to assess from a visual standpoint what was different. Because sometimes just standing in the room or taking pictures and send them to your coach looks the same until you get under those lights and under that sort of stimulus. Right.
Yeah. That's the cool part about the sport, really, is kind of like all this stuff is just like a daily habit, and then you go on stage and boom, there it is. Like, you see all those habits built into one thing, like the package, if you want to call it that. It's almost like completely different from any other thing in life. Like, a lot of sports aren't like that. Even like business really isn't like that in a way. That's because true. You have stuff, which you have stuff within life you can't control too, but like you have stuff within even a relationship you can't control, or business or school or whatever. Like, you can physically see and mentally feel as well, like all those things that you've done, that they're there.
Yeah.
It's pretty unique, I think.
Yeah, it's competing is weird. It's such a weird thing, and I love it. Like, it's just it's unlike, I don't know how to explain it. It's such a strange thing to do if you think about it.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's the process leading up to that. I think the process is what teaches you to translate to other areas of life. But the event itself, you're like, what's actually going on here?
Yeah. You just like drop an alien in from another planet. Like, wait, what's going on here?
Yeah. And then you're like, hey, judge this. And like, I don't think people understand, or most people don't understand or give credit to the judge's job. I've test judged like 3 times, I think. And that is so hard. And you think of the levels of our judges, you've got like state level, regional level judges, you've got national level, pro level, and then the Olympia judges. Like, think of how hard their job is and And that's a lot of weight on a judge's mind to make sure that they made the right decision because of how that affects everybody.
Right.
And that's why, I thank the judges for doing a thorough job because that's how I want to be assessed. I know how easy it could be for them to glance up at me and say, 16th. But when someone actually studies, and I can tell when a judge is actually studying me, I appreciate that because of all the stuff that I've put into it. At least I know that if I got dead last, they did a thorough and fair job, and that's all I want. The only times I've ever been disappointed when I stepped off stage was when I felt like I dropped the ball or I wasn't judged thoroughly and fairly. That wouldn't matter if I got a high placement or a low placement. And so, I don't know why I got on that tangent, but it's tough.
It's a big part of the sport, though, as much as you can do, it's up to somebody else to reward you for all that work or to tell you, hey, do this stuff next time.
Yeah. So. That's a hard job that I'm kind of glad I'm not a judge. It's very, very tough.
No, I've talked to a few judges on the show, and it is kind of crazy, what they say in some shows that they've judged, or a lot of shows really, is how close, it's oh my gosh, we know, okay, these people, especially at the smaller shows, these people maybe not so much, but then you have these other ones, it's man, especially the pro car shows, this person right here, they had, some conversations, they have the potential, and do we give it to them? Or this person sitting right here, and they're a little bit better, but maybe they're not in as great a position to succeed later on. So it's having that conversation is crazy within your own head as well. But it's a crazy world out there, bodybuilding is, and I'm really excited for this upcoming season and to continue to be a part of the sport. And I really appreciate you coming on and talking here tonight. Yeah,
thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
It was. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
If you're tired of searching for a coach or trainer, somebody who knows what they're talking about and has experience, make sure you go check out the new Coach's Corner on weightroompodcast.com. You can find quality, qualified coaches to help you achieve your goals, whether that's in bodybuilding or just general fitness. Stop wasting time and start achieving your goals today. The link to the Coach's Corner is down in the description below.